What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Daily Dime. We've got NBA, we've got PGA, and we've got maybe an early look at the Super Bowl because, Zach, we don't like a ton of stuff on the board today so far.
Yeah, man, just 5 games on tonight's NBA slate, 3 teams on the second end of a back-to-back. It looked like we did just get the Wizards injury report coming in. Alex Sarr being out once again here with the ankle injury is the biggest news from that 12:30 injury report. So when that game comes back up, I know we had a couple picks from that game that we were already eyeing, and really from a props and a DFS standpoint with Sarr out again here and no Anthony Davis on the Lakers side, it's Jonas Valanciunas night once again, whether we like it or not, right? Like, I'm not going away from J-Val and how strong he's going to look here just because he failed us last night. So to be honest, man, like last night was, for me, just straight up L. Like, there's no other way. Like, it was disgusting. It did not feel good as it was happening, and it kind of started with the ownership there on J-Val and Ty Jerome not starting and getting off some of that, and like got on some TJ McConnell, but it was just kind of a mess yesterday with the Charlotte value really busting and Diabate and Okogie, and I'm ready for this slate, man. I'm ready to get into Thursday.
We did at least set ourselves up potentially for a win today if Fleetwood goes under 3.5 birdies, because that pairing of the Wemby stocks and the Harden turnovers worked wonders. Harden was over on his turnovers in the first quarter. Like, it's just, I don't know why they keep posting it at 3.5, but we're going to keep playing it pretty much no matter how low that multiplier gets. It's just been such an unbelievable pick. And correlating it with the Wemby stocks worked out really well.
I mean,
so
I shout out Jeremy Sohan. I was going to say shout out Jeremy Sohan because I think he ripped Harden twice in the first quarter in his first rotation in the backcourt, which doesn't happen a ton there with the beard. And it was, again, just to sit here and moan and complain about my night too, right? You know, I went with the blocks. Wemby got his 4th block. They took one of them away somewhere along the line there, and he did have his first block on the first possession. So, again, it was just the nail in my coffin, but the ones that I did go to, those stocks picks in, like you said, waiting on Fleetwood here today. So all is not lost, and it's a new day. So let's talk about some of these.
Yeah, only bad news with Fleetwood. He did birdie his first hole, so hopefully he calms down.
Damn
it. But yeah, let's start here in the NBA. So we don't have a ton of picks that we love. I think what we'll do here is we'll talk through some of the NBA picks we are toying with. Of course, we will have free throws made props available probably within an hour or so, but unlikely to get those while we're live. So I think what we're going to end up doing is taking a first look at some of the Super Bowl props as well. Zach, where do you want to start here today?
Yeah, let's go. Okay, all reliable here. Let's pull up Dyson Daniels. We can get through some of these NBA picks really quick and see if Washington actually repopulates while we're live, because I think there's a Jordan Poole steals. Oh, look, it's back. Let's talk Jordan Poole steals, actually, because we're going to go Dyson Daniels. We're going to go Jordan Poole, but I like this Jordan Poole pick a lot, and we're still getting the 1.16x multiplier there. Poole is averaging just 1.6 steals per game on the season, and this is not one of these props like a DeJounte or a Dyson Daniels where we have him projected so far over this number, but we do have him 1.74 in the projection here today. He's over 1.5 steals in 22 of his 38 appearances so far this year, and if we look at the matchup data, the Lakers are giving an 18.6% boost to opposing point guards in the steals category. And he's played 31 or more minutes 21 times this season. We know the Wizards can find themselves in major blowout situations quite frequently. With no Anthony Davis on the other side of this one here tonight, this is just an 8.5 point spread, which I say just, right? It's the Wizards. And so like a single digit spread is something that we, I think, need to keep our eyes on with a guy like Jordan Poole, because he has been in more competitive games of late, been getting mid to sometimes upper 30s in minutes. So that's why I bring in the sample size of the 21 games of 31 minutes or more. He's got 2 or more steals in 16 of those 21. So in competitive games where you're getting full minutes from Jordan Poole, this has been a very, very strong prop. We are taking the over with a 1.16x multiplier here. I think this is, and again, maybe highlighting how few awesome picks I feel like there are on the board this morning. This is my favorite one here right around lunchtime.
Okay, so yesterday we hit on the pairing of the Harden turnovers with the Wemby stocks. Because I'm not like super into this pool pick, I think what I want to do is if I go there, it's got to be a correlated pairing. And so you and I were talking before we went live here about 2 turnover props from the Lakers. And we've got over 4.5 for LeBron at 1.11x. We have over 2.5 for Reeves. Now, one of the weird things that we found was for some reason, with no Anthony Davis on the floor, the turnover rate actually goes down for both LeBron and Reeves. Not the biggest sample size, and Washington doesn't force a ton of turnovers. But I think if you like the pool pick, I think you've got to like one of these. Do you have a lean here? And what is your thought on just like conceptually? It sure feels like no Anthony Davis should mean a higher turnover rate for these two guys.
Yeah, and it's, again, you mentioned the sample size, and it isn't that big, but it's also not so small where we should ignore it, right? We cannot confidently sit here and say that both LeBron and Austin Reeves, or one or the other, are going to get this massive increase in their turnover rate, because that is just not borne out in the numbers here. But we can also take a look at like the usage rates for these guys when Anthony Davis is off the floor, right? LeBron gets all the way up to 33.5. Austin Reeves, 26.2. You see the differences in their lines there on the board at Underdog, but we're getting the 1.11x multiplier on LeBron's higher than 4.5 turnovers. And on the full season, that's not a bad pick in the slightest. He's averaging right at 4, but he's got 5 or more turnovers in 19 of his 42 appearances this season, including 5 turnovers against this Washington team back just 9 days ago. And of course, that one was at home, and that one came in a 23-point win. This one a little bit closer. Again, kind of buying into like LeBron with no Anthony Davis. Probably 35 plus minutes here tonight, maybe getting closer to 40 than 35. So I think this also, again, this can correlate a little bit here if you're taking Poole on the other side. So I would prefer LeBron compared to Reeves, just because I think this line is solid regardless of Anthony Davis being in or not, if we're looking at his track record this season.
Yep. It's also worth noting last game for the Lakers, Anthony Davis only played 10 minutes. LeBron had 8 turnovers. Reeves had 3. Now, that was against Philly. Philly, for as bad as they are, they have been the second best team at forcing opponent turnovers. Very odd that, like, that's one of the strengths. But yeah, whatever. There are signs that I think this is a good pick. And obviously, man, it just makes sense, right? Like the ball's going to be in LeBron's hands so much in this game. So I think I would lean to the over 4.5. Let's get correlation and let's really boost the payout all the way up to 3.47x. And then if we just added just something else, we'll see. The 3-pick play is going to get us to what just happened.
Did it go down?
LeBron went down to 3.5 turnovers is what just happened. Okay.
Interesting.
At 0.84x.
No, thank you.
I don't know. I might like it.
Well, what if we throw in, like, I mentioned Dyson Daniels before I got excited about Jordan Poole. Yeah. The Dyson Daniels 2.5 steals is at 1.14x. So if you're pairing the LeBron turnovers now at this 0.84, but we have those other 2 steals props that are bringing us back multiplier-wise, this is potentially doable here.
Yeah. Yeah, let me see. I'm trying to check if we have turnovers for Poole or turnovers for LeBron and steals for Poole on the same game parlay tool, and it looks like
it just went back to 4.5 for me. By the way, 1.17 now.
What is the point of that?
Yeah, I don't know.
So yeah, I will say here on the same game parlay tool, reminder for you guys, if you have a VIP subscription instead of just a DFS subscription, you can use this tool. Obviously, like on the Prize Picks tool, on the DraftKings Pick 6 tool, the only picks you can look at are the ones that are available. And obviously over on Sportsbooks, you're going to get more picks that are available. So you can always check this stuff out. If we change that 3.5 to 4.5, let's see what happens. So we only have 37.6% for LeBron to go over, but we are getting this like really big correlation. So you can see the correlation here is as strong as we hope for. In fact, that's exceptionally strong. And you and I both seem to think that this is probably actually better than 37.6%. We have LeBron, I should say, projected for 4.08 turnovers. So no AD. The matchup with Washington, like they don't force a ton of turnovers, but I wouldn't call them a bad turnover matchup. And yet we have LeBron projected for less in his average turnovers. I think that's because we're projecting that pace is just going down across the league, which is probably true. But that doesn't necessarily mean fewer turnovers for a guy who should have the ball as much as LeBron in this situation. So I think that this pairing works. Let's see, where do I see? Yeah, so LeBron still 4.5 now and over an underdog, 1.17x once again. I like it. I think I like it here, Zach. What's your thought?
I mean, I have this entry in here with Poole, LeBron, and Dyson Daniels, right? And I had the LeBron at 4.5. So we're getting that multiplier. Like, so that 3 pick right now, your standard 6x payout is being taken all the way up to 8.35x on a standard 3 pick payout here. So again, I don't think unless you want to tell me something I don't know about Dyson Daniels, like I think we're still going to take the higher than 2.5 there at a plus 1x multiplier. Cleveland does give a 12% boost to opposing shooting guards. We've got him projected right at his season average of 3.1. He's over 2.5 steals in 4 of his last 5, 7 of his last 10, and 25 of his 42 appearances this season. And against Cleveland, they faced off twice, 2 steals in one game, 3 in the next. So not some huge indicator there in the matchup, but it's not like he's been shut out or way under this number against Cleveland in 2 meetings this year. So everything points to us continuing to ride Dyson Daniels steals when they keep giving us these great multipliers. And I have one more pick that I do have in entries here this morning, but is a little bit more speculative than the 3 we've talked about.
Real quick, before we get to that pick, I just want to point out here in the same game parlay tool, you can see it gives a true odds plus 701. Here on Underdog, we are getting the 8.35x payout. Now, do have to remember, like, you don't get your wager back here on Underdog, so this is like plus 735. So true odds plus 701, we're getting plus 735. That means our tool says this is already a good 3-pick play. And remember, we think that LeBron is being underprojected on his turnover. So the tool already says it's good. We think it's even better than what the tool suggests. So I'm good with this 3-pick play. And let's hear what else you have.
Yeah, so again, I have this in entries here this morning. I do prefer this 3-pick play that we just concocted here. But Darius Garland, right? So we've got the Cavs obviously on the other side of that matchup against the Hawks here. Cavs on the second end of a back-to-back. They're 10-point home favorites here. Highest implied total on the slate, a 238.5. Of course, shorthanded Atlanta. Darius Garland sat out last night for rest. So I don't think it's crazy to see once this injury report comes. I imagine we get the Cavs news on the 1:30. If we see Donovan Mitchell sit, or maybe even Evan Mobley, who's been in and out of the lineup over the last couple weeks with injury, right? I think it was an ankle last for Evan Mobley. That would obviously help this. Darius Garland, higher than 29.5 points plus assists. Now, he's only over this number in 19 of his 45 games so far this year, but we've got him projected, of course, in this up-paced matchup. We've got him projected for 31.1 points plus assists here tonight in the model. And again, that's with everybody being projected in. He rested last night, as I mentioned. Not surprised if one of those other starters takes a seat here tonight. And he's over in both games that Donovan Mitchell has missed this season and over in 5 of 6 games that Evan Mobley has missed this season. So I think this is a pick where right now I lean towards the over. And the reason I put it in an entry or two here this morning is this is going to move probably 2, 3, maybe even 4 points if one of those guys takes a seat here. So again, kind of a speculative pick that I actually had in before we saw some of these steals and turnovers picks populate.
I want to ask you a question here. Are you concerned at all about the individual matchup? Because we use these like individual matchups a bunch when we're talking these stocks props and turnover props. Maybe we don't talk about it as much on points, assists, things like that. But Atlanta, though they are a good matchup overall for opponent production, like plus 15% for shooting guards on their points, plus 20% for power forwards on their points. Point guards, negative 24% on their points, negative 11% on their assists. I kind of think that's just the Dyson Daniels effect, but what's your thought here? And maybe this is somewhere like, could Garland actually benefit from Donovan Mitchell getting the Dyson Daniels effect instead? Something like that.
Potentially. I think, right, that we've seen these teams play twice this season. Garland was well over this number in one and came up just shy in the other. Of the two players that I think are more likely to rest here in that starting lineup in Mitchell and Mobley, I would rather have Mobley take a seat, because then I think we still get Dyson Daniels mainly on Donovan Mitchell when both guards are out there in the backcourt. But either way, I think this number would just, the projection is not going down here if you remove either of those guys from the lineup. So again, I think that's mostly what's pointing me towards this, is the speculation that I'm making here, that one of those guys could sit on a pick that, again, is not coming to the top of the parlay tool or the prize picks tool, but we do have, projected him to go over by 1.6 in this category.
Mm-hmm. I think we should also mention, if Mitchell does play here, once again, we're not projecting the turnovers to be high, but averages 1.9 on the season. Atlanta is boosting opponent shooting guard turnovers by 89%. That is the Dyson Daniels effect, without question. I would be interested in the Donovan Mitchell over 2.5 turnovers, I think, if he were to suit up at 1.06x. Not something we can put in now, since there is question that he will actually suit up. But I think, especially since we're using the 1.14x over 2.5 Dyson Daniels steals, would definitely be interested in pairing that with the Donovan Mitchell turnovers. So something to keep an eye on throughout the day, particularly as we get some free throw made props, maybe like those. And if you have nothing else, I think we can also now turn to the NFL and see if we can get some early looks at the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I think if you wanted to go to that Donovan Mitchell turnovers prop, I imagine you'll get a similar correlation boost in the tools at FTN Fantasy. Similar correlation that we saw in the tool with Poole and LeBron. I think you'd get a similar type of output there with Daniels and Spider. So let's go ahead. Let's take a look at the big game, man. I have some props that I've been rolling around in my head without looking at anything. So I'm interested to see where you're going to push us as somebody who's been diving in a little bit already.
Yeah, I want to real quick say we're showing a ton of correlation on the Dyson Daniels Donovan Mitchell pick, but that's in part because we have Mitchell projected so low that the actual percentage for Mitchell, not great. So it looks like what we are projecting is almost any time Mitchell actually goes over the 2.5 turnovers, Dyson Daniels is getting at least 2 of those steals. So we really, really like the correlation there, but we will see. I think this is a pair that I will use tonight if Mitchell is in fact in, because 89% is a massive number, and I don't think that's a fluke of any kind.
I see.
Right,
P Mike in the chat was saying, did we take out the Trae Young pick? Didn't have one in there, P Mike. So our 3 pick was the Dyson Daniels higher than 2.5 steals, then correlating Jordan Poole higher than 1.5 steals with LeBron James higher than 4.5 turnovers.
Zach saying, not a bad turnover. The nicest thing he's heard about his team all season. Yeah, probably is the nicest thing. It's probably the nicest thing you'll hear all season, honestly. But yeah, all right, let's turn to the NFL now, because I do think there's some early looks. And real quick, I think before we even start with these picks, the whole idea of going to the Super Bowl props this early is we know this game is going to get a ton of attention. The props are going to be more efficient this week than most weeks. I shouldn't even say this week. Next week than most weeks. Our best chance for getting a ton of value on these picks is early in the week. Remember last week, when we first went to the Dallas Goedert receiving yards, we got over 34.5, over 35.5. By game time, it was 42.5, 43.5 most places, and he went flying over both. So you could have just waited and taken it anyway. It would have worked. But we're going to see a lot of line movement on a lot of these props. The earlier we can get in, the better. I'm going to go to Old Reliable with my first one. I took a look through all these earlier today, and there wasn't a whole lot that I liked. But Samaje Perine over 6.5 receiving yards, I think, is really strong. I think it's really strong because it's just been phenomenal all season. Let's remember, he actually hit, by the way, on the last play last week, that 17-yard reception to seal the game, let them ice the clock. Prior to that, 0 yards in the first round of the playoffs for them, but then 13, 20, 50, 23, 16, 15, 11, 8, 37, 25, 30, 22, 24. The last time he failed was September 29th, other than that first round with Houston. So this has been an awesome one all season. And I think it's really strong against Philly too, because Philadelphia is really good against the run. They force a lot of third and mediums, third and longs. They force a lot of checkdowns because they cover receivers so well. So I think this Pirine 6.5 number is great. I would expect it to be more like 9.5, 10.5, maybe even 11.5 by game time, which could end up being the difference. So I really like the 6.5 right now. And I think it's a really good just one-off. I also like the fact that because it's just a yardage prop, I don't have to worry about maxing it out, right? If we were going to Saquon longest rush, I'd have to be careful about how much I use it throughout the week because I know there's a max that you can spend on it. There isn't one on Pirine. So this is probably one that, like, over the next week or so, I'm just going to have with a ton of different NBA, PGA combinations where hopefully come Super Bowl, it's like, man, all I need is a Pirine 7-yard reception, and I just hit 6 different 3-pick plays, something like that. So I really, really expect to have a lot of this Pirine number.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I don't know why we would go away from it at a lower number. Like, I know it feels like he's he hasn't been targeted as much over the last couple games as we were used to during the regular season. I was thinking maybe, Pacheco being out and then coming back has something to do with it, but Pacheco hasn't been, as involved as at least I expected. And
honestly, the pick that I think it's just been that in the last 2 games, Mahomes has pretty much been able to throw it where he wants to throw it. So he hasn't had to check down. He hasn't had to extend plays and scramble where he like ad-libs and finds Pirine so often. But Philly is so much better in the secondary than the 2 teams they faced. And the other thing I'll say there is, like, it's also extremely, extremely noteworthy that they needed 1 play for a first down, and they drew up a play for Samaje Perine. They obviously like him. They had him on the field for a reason. He's consistently been on the field running routes in these last 2 games, just hasn't been targeted. But the other, like, he's not getting these targets where he might have a 2-reception, 5-yard game. When he gets these receptions, it's consistently double-digit yards. So, I just think it's really strong.
So, like, to that end, on the Mahomes side of things, like, one prop that I had in mind that I wanted to take a look at, and I see now 6.5, is the rushing attempts number on Patrick Mahomes. We are getting a 1.07x multiplier on that. He's over this number in each of his last 3 playoff games, which of course includes the Super Bowl from last year. And I believe in terms of his 4 Super Bowl appearances, over in 2 of the 4. I guess what I'm thinking here is, like, Patrick Mahomes, and I would have loved this even more if it was 5.5, but of course 6.5 here. The fact that he runs more in the playoffs, I think you could probably say that the same for Jalen Hurts on the other side. Certainly Lamar before the Ravens were knocked out. We also get potential kneel downs as rushing attempts, right? So, like, I know you don't want to hear that Patrick Mahomes might be kneeling the ball out 10 days from now. But that was one that I had in mind. And, like, would that be a negative correlation with Pirine? Because, again, like you're saying, he likes to find Pirine sometimes when they put him in motion or he's forced to roll out. Obviously, both of these things can't happen on the same play, so maybe that's not something you would ever look to pair. But that was kind of the Mahomes prop in my head over the last couple of days that I was like, all right, once I break into this stuff, I want to see not only what the line is, what our projections say, but what Alex had to say about it. So do you have any thoughts on Mahomes, or maybe if we're not going to attempts, rushing yards, something with Mahomes using his legs is where my mind was going.
Yeah, so the first thing I'll say here is I think the fact that kneels count is actually a very important point to make. He's had 2 kneel downs in each of the last 2 games, so he wouldn't have gotten there against Houston without those kneel downs. And, like, I think you just approach it from a probabilistic standpoint. The likelihood that Mahomes and the Chiefs are in a kneel down situation, probably less against Philly than against Houston. Probably pretty much the same as the probability as it was against Houston. He got it. Obviously, he ran 11 times. They had some designed runs for him, which we haven't really seen. I think that this pick is priced well. Like, I think this is just a very fair
7 is
line.
a lot.
It is.
Even with meals.
I mean, in the regular season, we would be hammering the under on this number. So it's 100% true that Mahomes runs more in the playoffs. Just also think that is fully accounted for. We have some questions in here. One asking, do we do DFS on DraftKings? Hell yes, we do. And with that, how do you feel about Garland in single entry?
I mean, in single entry tonight, again, just so Don, for what it's worth, I play mostly 20 max contests there on DraftKings. Especially if Mobley or Mitchell sit, I'm going to love Darius Garland. I think he's in play regardless. He made it into my placeholder, again, playing MME on both DraftKings and, well, FanDuel. I've been running one lineup a night lately. But Darius Garland made it into my placeholder on both sites. So I think he is a very, very strong play regardless of anybody resting. And you can see in our GPP scores here at FTNFantasy.com, Darius Garland is listed second behind backcourt mate Ty Jerome, who, again, is probably going to be in a bench role here tonight. So we're still waiting on that injury report. Like, we could see Sam Merrill sit out again, right? We know a couple other pieces are missing here from this Cleveland team. So I think you can go to Garland regardless. And for your ownership purposes, you probably want these guys to play to keep the ownership away from Garland, because if one of them sit, it's just going to go up, 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 especially if it's Donovan Mitchell taking a rest.
Yeah, Don, for some context here, what these GPP scores tell you is how under-owned or over-owned a player is. And so the more positive the GPP score, the more under-owned we believe the player is, the more likely they're just, it's you basically, you look at how likely are they to really succeed, how likely are they to fail, how owned are they, and how well does that ownership reflect their likelihood of success and failure. And we're saying that Garland is significantly more likely to succeed and significantly less likely to fail than his ownership suggests. So he's a fantastic play here. So very much like the Garland call here in single entry. Let's go back to the NFL just for a second, and then we can kind of talk about the rest of the NBA DFS slate. I just want to point out that there's a lot that you can choose from here already for the Super Bowl. So like, one of the things that I want to look at is sacks. And particularly, I want to look at Nolan Smith's sacks. I think that over 0.5 at 1.13x is really strong. He's come on real strong here in the playoffs. I think it's 4 sacks in the last 3 games, something like that. But it's also about the fact that the Kansas City offensive line is strongest in the interior, weakest on the outside. And as strong as they are in the interior, they still have to put most of their focus on slowing down Jalen Carter, not letting Jalen Carter win the game for this Philadelphia defense. And when you're already weaker on the outside and you have to put so much focus on the inside, I think that really sets up Nolan Smith for a lot of one-on-one opportunities. The hardest part of this, though, is you actually have to get Mahomes on the ground. You can't just beat your guy. You got to get Mahomes on the ground. Mahomes is so damn good at avoiding sacks, extending plays, things of that nature. So I think this over 0.5 sacks, 1.13x is good, but I'm not as in love with it as I am with the P. Ryan receiving yards. So want to put it on people's radars, but I'm not necessarily playing it just yet.
Is there anything else from the game, maybe on the offensive side of the ball for the Eagles, that's standing out for you yet before we move on to the DFS slate?
I need to do a little bit more diving in to the kind of coverage types that I expect Kansas City to play. I think the most kind of like fun story to tell in this matchup so far is Philadelphia has blitzed the most in the entire NFL. Maybe it was the second most. I can't remember. But there's a reason for this. And you would think it's because they don't handle the blitz well, right? Well, Jalen Hurts was 13th in DVOA against the pass or against the blitz this season. So it's not that. The reason is you have to get pressure on Jalen Hurts. He's been a top 10 quarterback without pressure. He's been like the 35th best quarterback with pressure, something like that this season. It's a massive distinction. And the Philly offensive line is so good that the only way you're actually going to get pressure is if you send extra pass rushers. So that's why teams have been sending the blitz so often. But man, if you send the blitz and that blitz doesn't get pressure, Hurts and the Eagles offense has killed teams. So what I really want to do is kind of dive in to this matchup and figure out who's going to win when they blitz. And it's different with Spagnuolo because his blitzes are less about like sending more guys than you can block and more about how well are you prepared for that exact blitz. Are you shifting the protection in the right direction? Like remember the play that Dalton Kincaid dropped in that Buffalo game. Kurt Warner put out like a 10-minute breakdown video of how he would have shifted the protection the opposite direction. Had those free rushers blitz, he thinks he would have gotten a conversion. Now, just because he says that doesn't mean it's true. Right. But the point is, like, Spagnuolo is trying to confuse you. He's trying to make you make mistakes in the protection. And if he can do that, then the pressure's going to get there. If he can't do it, if Jeff Stoutland, the Eagles offensive line coach, and Jalen Hurts just have a plan for these pressures and they're well prepared for them, then Philly's going to have a lot of success offensively. So all of that is a long-winded way of saying I'm not ready to make any stands on a lot of these props. I need to do a little bit more research and find out. But I want to make sure I do that early enough that these lines aren't moving too much before that.
All right, so no super early stands here. But speaking of people who may be taking the stand soon, Alex, Terry Rozier is under investigation by federal prosecutors for potentially cooperating in an illegal sports betting scheme in 2023 while with the Hornets. That is per Chris Haynes. So, yikes.
That's a bad one.
Yeah.
That's a real bad
one. And I see Costco in here. Welcome to Costco. I love you. Says, do y'all like Jackson Hayes' rebounds today? I personally don't, and it's not just because we haven't projected to go under that 7.5 line that Underdog is giving us. We could be a little bit low on his minutes right now. I think he's set at 24.5. I do not like that Jackson Hayes, for his rebounds in particular, that he's going to see Jonas Valanciunas now on the other side, just from like a sheer physical stature standpoint. Like Jonas Valanciunas, I think, is going to be able to push Jackson Hayes around and be all over the glass on both ends of the floor here. So I did look at multiple Jackson Hayes props here this morning. Nothing that I like. So I'm personally passing on that, Costco. But he is over this number in 2 of his 3 starts this year, for what it's worth. Both of those overs, he played over 30 minutes. So if we are off on this projection here today, it's going to look a lot stronger. It's just the combination of our projection in the model here and just what I think is going to happen on the court tonight with the actual matchup personnel-wise. It's a stay away from me. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and especially coming off a night where J-Val didn't get what he wanted against Jakob Poeltl. Not that he is that vengeful, but Jonas, more often than not, he's going to get what he wants on the glass there. So, and I saw Zed in here also saying Xavier Worthy rush yards. Do you have any thoughts there at the moment?
So yeah, Worthy in the last 5 games against Cleveland, 3 for 30, then 3 for 10, 2 for 10, no rushes against Denver. That game didn't matter. 1 for -8 against Houston, and then 2 for 16 against Buffalo. So what I am confident in is Worthy's going to get at least 1 rush attempt here. The only game in the last 6 really that he hasn't gotten a single attempt was in that Denver game. They weren't trying. He barely played. So he's going to get an attempt. But the Eagles are so disciplined. They're so good at tackling that this feels really risky to me. I think like one of the more likely outcomes is the Houston type play where they try it once, it's a negative play, and they say, all right, screw that. This isn't the type of matchup. This isn't the team to do this against, and they don't try it again. So I don't like this. I also don't like the under, though, because it only takes 1 play. So this right. Just seems like a really tough one to choose. I think what you do here actually is you say, here, I'll share this for a second. Under 1.5 is 1.34x. I like that. And over like 9.5 is 1.32x. Over 14.5 is 2. I think you want to ladder this in some way. You either go negative for the boost or you go positive for the boost, and you say, what happens if he gets an 18-yard run, a 21-yard run, something like that. So that's the way I would play this instead. I think this like 6.5 number is just in no man's land. It is bad, but either direction works because we are confident he's going to get a touch on the ground, and it's just a matter of what actually happens there. And I think Philly's defense is good enough that you can take the under 1.5 at 1.34x pretty confidently, but you can also then take the latter opportunity and hope that he just it turns it into a big run. Or maybe this game he gets 3 carries and 2 of them are 8-yard runs, just like last game. So that's the way I would play it.
So I'm sitting here like diving into Terry Rozier's like game logs from the both 2022-23 season and last year, like trying to see like, is there a month? Is there something that's sticking out here? He did have the lowest 3-point percentage over his last 8 seasons in the 22-23 season, shot sub 33%. I don't think that's indicative of like malicious intent there. So I'm very interested to see what is being alleged or accused here in terms of what Rozier did and what his cooperation level was. Let's talk DFS if you're ready to go there.
Yeah. Are you able to talk DFS on your own here? I actually have to jump.
Yeah, absolutely. I can run through a couple notes here. So see you tomorrow, dude. Good stuff here. Enjoy the rest of your day. And I will take over from here, everybody, as we bid adieu to Alex. I'll go ahead and pull up the ownership projections here so we can get that on the screen as well. Just bear with me for a moment as we pull this up. And here we go. We'll get a couple zooms, right? Just what you were seeing. We saw those Cavs, that trio of Cavs at the top of the GPP scores. And I do think the ownership here, of course, if somebody takes a rest, the ownership will rise across the board for Cleveland. And I think that could happen regardless, especially if we don't get any other value opening up throughout the day, because Cleveland is in one of, if not the best spot here tonight in the game with the highest implied total. They are 10-point home favorites here, but Hawks the second fastest team in the league. So overall, I would have more interest in getting to them compared to even a team like the Lakers without Anthony Davis against Washington, which I didn't necessarily think was going to happen here. So the Cavs look great. Model loves them here in the GPP scores, and you can see the ownership is not going crazy here. We have LeBron at 41%, which makes all the sense in the world because we also have Minnesota. And Minnesota, they may be without Naz Reid. That is one of the 2 teams we're still waiting on an injury report for, but you can see the field right now more interested in getting to the Wolves than the Cavs or the Lakers as a whole. And that also makes sense to me because this is such a tight rotation at the moment for Minnesota. You saw Naz Reid go out yesterday and did we open up the rotation? No. Chris Finch basically ran, we'll say 6.5 guys because Rob Dillingham did get about 14.5 minutes there. Jalen Clark played the end of the second and the third quarters for 10 minutes. But essentially, you got between 30 and 39 minutes from Conley, Gobert, Randall, Ant Edwards, Jaden McDaniels, and Nickeil Alexander-Walker. So if we are without Naz Reid once again, then all 6 of those guys, I think, to varying degrees, look like very, very strong plays, and really on both sides. Nickeil Alexander-Walker with the guard forward eligibility at 3,400 just opens so much up. It allows you to get up to LeBron with no Anthony Davis, which I don't disagree with the field there in terms of him being the top spend up on the slate. And I think you could, on this 5-gamer, you could call him just the top play overall. And I think it's very telling that even at 41%, in his own tier, in terms of projected ownership on the morning run, still getting that healthy, positive GPP score there in the model here. It looks like we get Haynes with a statement from the league, from spokesman Mike Bass. This is very interesting to me. In March 23, the NBA was alerted to unusual betting activity related to Terry Rozier's performance in a game between Charlotte and New Orleans. Oh, let's follow along here, huh? March 23. Charlotte and New Orleans. Boom. And that was the last game he played of the season. Came out 9 minutes in. Did he fake an injury? The league conducted an investigation and did not find a violation of NBA rules. We are now aware of an investigation by the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of New York related to this matter and have been cooperating with that. Okay. So let's say Pelicans Not Pelicans. It is Pelicans. Hornets and Pelicans. March 23rd, 2003. Recap. Rozier. Charlotte guard Terry Rozier left with a sore right foot after scoring 5 points. So this is a Jonte Porter situation, right? Goes out there, plays 9.5 minutes, leaves early. All the unders hit. Interesting. Not good. Not good for Terry there. We'll get back to business here before we go ahead and close things out. You can't go wrong with Minnesota here today. $4,300 Mike Conley. You can get there. Rudy Gobert, $5,600 revenge spot against Utah. Sign me up. He was in my placeholder. But right, Jaden at $5,500. Julius Randle, $75. Even Anthony Edwards on this slate at $9,500. All of these guys are very strong, and that's the reason why you see these top 6 Wolves in the top 12 ownership spots here? 11 or 12? Getting some additional news here. John Collins available to play. I think that was expected. So nothing crazy here. I do think Amen Thompson. Interesting that he's got the negative tournament score there. Still guard forward, 8,300. Lost minutes last time with no Tari Eason. But to me, Jayshawn Tate, watching that game, Jayshawn Tate, I think, ended perfect. He at least started 6 of 6 in that one and got up to 25 minutes. And Amen was the guy who lost time. Came just short of 31 minutes in that one. That was a big-time departure from what we've seen over the last month or so, especially with no Jabari Smith. If Amen on the 5-game slate is going to be sub 20%, I will probably be over that number. But again, lots can change between now and lock. And again, these numbers have SAR still in. So Jonas Valanciunas, I expect to jump to the top at least the top 2 or 3 in ownership here. And then over on FanDuel real quick, GPP scores. Look, Darius Garland, number 1. You can play him whether guys sit or not. He's very strong. Onyeka Okongwu with the power forward eligibility over there on FanDuel. And speaking of power forward eligible, if Mohamed Gay starts again at the 4 for the Hawks, he's not going to be a great fantasy producer alongside Trey and Okongwu and really anybody else that is a first-team mainstay there. But he's so cheap and has the power forward eligibility that I think he'd be worth some shots in tournaments if he gets another start here. Tari Eason, 5,600, popping in the GPP scores. It's pace up spot. Memphis, I think, tops in the league still in terms of the pace. 4.5 point spread, 236.5 implied total. So a closer spread, similar implied total there in Memphis. Almost impossible to get to Memphis right now with everybody healthy. But Houston can make some sense. And I still think it starts with Amen Thompson for me. I don't expect him to all of a sudden, with how well he, and by extension the Rockets as a whole, have been playing, I don't expect him to all of a sudden be down into the low 30s in minutes consistently. I think we should still expect upper 30s. And maybe cresting 40 again in a competitive game. You can see the tournament scores liking some of these Hawks spends. It's not just Onyeka Okongwu on FanDuel, but Dyson Daniels and Trae Young as well. I don't know if I'm getting there. But if we lose some Cavs on the injury report and the spread comes a little bit closer, you can maybe talk me into that. But again, we need to get these updated. We've got these Washington. You've still got SAR in here. So we'll get these numbers updated. And of course, our subscribers will get those shortly. Appreciate, and I see Josh in here. Appreciate that. John Collins is in. Appreciate everybody tuning in, sticking with me, and Alex while he was here on this Thursday edition of the Daily Dime. Back tomorrow, breaking down a much larger NBA slate. Maybe we'll have some more NFL picks to discuss as well. So enjoy the rest of your day, everybody. I'll do the same. We'll see you back here on Friday for another episode of the Daily Dime. Goodbye.